Right then, let's get straight back into the thick of it, shall we? You remember our Richard? Driving along that desolate highway after offering the headless woman the cola? Well, he was in a right state, wasn't he? Didn't know what to expect next. Richard kept his eyes glued to that rearview mirror, but the back seat remained empty as a ghost town. Still, he had this eerie feeling, like he was being watched by unseen eyes. The air in the car was still biting cold, a constant reminder of the strange presence that had briefly shared his ride. He drove on and on, the silence in the car so thick you could cut it with a knife. Only the hum of the engine and the crackling static from the AM radio dared to break the stillness. Richard was beside himself, wondering how he was supposed to talk to Sarah. Should he start the conversation, or should he wait for the headless woman to make the first move? He was terrified of breaking some unseen rule and facing the wrath of that spectral being. Lost in his anxious thoughts, Richard continued his lonely drive, completely unsure of what the next moment would bring. The silence in the car was unnerving, a proper unsettling quiet. And then, just as suddenly as it had fallen, the silence was shattered by a voice. Richard nearly jumped out of his skin. It was a woman's voice, soft as a whisper, but it stopped him dead in his tracks. Months of yearning, months of desperate hope had led to this moment. He was finally going to speak to Sarah. Tears of joy welled up in his eyes as he heard her voice. "Nina?" Richard choked out, using Sarah's pet name. "Is that really you?" "Yes, Richard," the voice replied, a hint of warmth in its tone. "Who else would it be?" "Oh, Sarah," Richard sobbed, his voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea how much I've missed you. I've wanted to talk to you for so long. I love you so much." "I love you too, Richard," Sarah replied softly. "And I'm so sorry, so incredibly sorry. You were right, you know. I should have listened to you. I should have trusted your judgment. If I had, maybe things would be different now. Maybe I'd still be with you." Richard's heart ached at her words. "No, Sarah, don't say that," Richard pleaded, tears streaming down his face. "It's my fault. I'm the one who should be sorry. I was so wrong. I should have believed you. Everything you said was true, but I didn't listen. And now you're gone. I failed you, Sarah. I failed you as a husband." "Richard, please don't cry," Sarah said gently. "Look at me." As Sarah spoke those words, Richard slowed the car down. He carefully reached his hand towards the back seat, his heart pounding in his chest. He kept the car moving slowly, driving with one hand, while the other reached behind. He then cautiously turned his head. The back seat was shrouded in darkness, a mere shadow visible where Sarah should have been. He couldn't make out any features. With a trembling hand, he switched on the interior light and looked again. And there she was, Sarah. It was Sarah, exactly as he remembered her. The woman in the back seat had taken on her very likeness. Richard couldn't believe his eyes. He was overjoyed. His dead wife sitting right there in his car. He wanted to stop the car, to hold her, to tell her everything. But something held him back, a sense of unease. Suddenly the figure of Sarah spoke again. "Don't cry, Richard. Please be quiet. Crying won't do any good now. I'm gone after all." As Richard watched Sarah speak, a cold dread washed over him. This wasn't right. He had wanted to see his wife, but the way she spoke, the way her lips moved, it was almost mechanical, lifeless, like some sort of robotic doll uttering pre-programmed phrases. There was no warmth in her voice, no expression on her face. Her eyes were hollow, deep pools of darkness that seemed to stare right through him. Richard realized with chilling certainty that this wasn't Sarah. This wasn't the woman he loved. He hadn't wanted to meet some malevolent spirit, some grotesque monster. He wanted his wife. A wave of panic washed over him. He wanted to stop the car, to get out, to run as far away as possible. But as he tried to look away, he found he couldn't. Some unseen force held his gaze locked on the figure in the back seat. The car continued to speed down the empty highway, his foot somehow still pressing the accelerator. Slowly, Richard's muscles began to tense up. Only one hand was still free, gripping the steering wheel, and even that felt like it was moving against his will. He was trapped, forced to stare into those empty eyes. It felt like he was being pulled backwards, strapped into his seat by invisible belts. Every muscle in his body was tightening, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. His foot pressed down harder on the accelerator, the car surging forward. The hand on the steering wheel seemed to have a mind of its own, guiding the vehicle at an ever-increasing speed. Richard tried to speak, to scream, but no sound would come out. His throat was constricted, his vocal cords frozen with terror. Then, the figure in the back seat spoke again. "Why, Richard," the voice purred, a sinister edge creeping into its tone. "I told you, didn't I? You should have trusted me. I kept telling you there was someone who wanted to take me away, a demon who had control over me, who wanted to claim me. But you never believed me. You just kept saying I'd get better in the hospital, that everything would be all right. You just wanted to escape your responsibilities." Richard could only listen, tears streaming silently down his face. He tried to speak, to beg for forgiveness, but his mouth wouldn't move. Only a faint, choked sound escaped his lips. Then, the voice continued, its tone hardening. "Do you think you did the right thing, Richard? You know you didn't. And now you're going to pay the price. Richard, you know how you're going to pay, don't you? Yes, Richard, you have to die. You have to die now, and that will be the final reckoning." Richard tried desperately to scream, but his body wouldn't obey. He tried to fight, to wrestle back control, but it was no use. He was completely helpless. Suddenly, the figure's eyes in the back seat became even sharper, more intense, and then the steering wheel violently jerked to the left. The car careened off the road. With a sickening lurch, the vehicle plunged into the valley, a terrifying freefall into the darkness below. Just at that moment, Richard felt control return to his muscles, but it was too late. There was nothing he could do. Finally, the car crashed, the impact throwing Richard around like a rag doll. The next time he opened his eyes, he was in a hospital bed, broken, battered, and completely paralyzed. And that was the story of Richard. He had tried to speak to his dead wife, Sarah. As I mentioned before, Richard had never believed Sarah when she said she felt possessed by a demon. She had tried to explain it to him countless times, but Richard had always relied on medical science. He had never considered that she might actually be telling the truth. If he had listened to her then, she might still be with him today. And even at the very end, he had only come to Blackwood Canyon to find out if Sarah had been right, if there really was a malevolent entity haunting her. He hadn't come because he loved her. He had come seeking proof. And in doing so, he had sealed his own fate. The entity that had possessed Sarah had now claimed him. Richard was alive, but his life was irrevocably changed, a living testament to his disbelief. So friends, sometimes, just sometimes, we modern folk can be a bit too quick to dismiss things we don't understand. Now, I'm not saying you should believe everything you hear, but perhaps if someone tells you something, you should at least listen and try to see things from their perspective. Speaking of which, just a few days ago, I was contacted on Instagram by a young lady from London. She told me she was a paranormal investigator and that her work had had a negative impact on her life. She has promised to share many of her stories with us, with proof, and I'm hoping to bring her on live, perhaps via a Zoom session, so she can tell you all about her experiences firsthand. She's going to share some incredible encounters with us, and I hope you enjoyed both parts of the Headless Woman of Blackwood Canyon Highway story.